independent of Congress is completely misdirected. Originally, the Constitution made our money independent of all electoral politics by fixing the monetary unit as the dollar, by outlawing bills of credit, and by allowing only silver and gold for payment in personal contracts to operate as legal tender. Instead of making money politically independent or politically neutral, the Constitution actually settled on one political formula, a money of intrinsic value. The creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913 did not make Federal Reserve notes politically independent or politically neutral. It merely changed the political character of the money system by empowering a small, non-elected, self-styled experts and private bankers to control the Federal Reserve notes and the supply thereof, the interest rates, and all other monetary and banking phenomena. The Federal Reserve System actually politicized money because it enabled politicians, administrators, and a few very specially selected special interest groups to exercise the very control over our money system that the Constitution originally disallowed. Although control of the monetary and banking system has serious political significance, apologists for the Federal Reserve System have been extremely successful in keeping the monetary and banking system issues from the agendas of both major political parties, political candidates, and anyone else in the political arena. As a result, there is no public political discussion on these issues anymore in our society. There is no serious political movement now to propose the immediate restoration of our constitutional money system. No serious political movement demands that all paper currency of private banks be true fiduciary monies. No serious political movement attacks fraudulent fractional reserve banking. No serious political movement denounces the incestuous relationship between the federal government and the federal banks through the Federal Reserve Corporation. It is vitally important politically that no serious political movement challenges the government's use of the monetary and banking systems to regulate the economy. And it is of vital political significance that the general public is simply unable to devise any kind of strategy in dealing with the satanic Federal Reserve Corporation as a supposed agency of the federal government. The Federal Reserve System, when it testifies before Congress, tells Congress what the policies will be, not the other way around. Congress does not control it. Nobody has a handle on this agency. Nobody. A group that could exercise all these matters without complaint by any significant portion of the public must be very powerful. How the apologists for the Federal Reserve System has managed to stifle public political debate on the Federal Reserve Corporation, the history books do not tell. What is clear is that the Federal Reserve was established to remove the Constitution as the controlling agency in national monetary policy and to guarantee that certain special interest groups were disproportionately represented in determining that policy. The result of these things is what we call a monopoly, the setting up of a monopoly. Let's talk about levels of the Federal Reserve System. First level, we could describe the Federal Reserve System as a tool for stabilizing the inherently fraudulent fractional reserve banking system. The purpose of the Federal Reserve System is not necessarily to do what the banks want, but to do what they need. For example, if we have a regime of commodity money, the way we were established under our republic, then the bankers employ the inherently fraudulent fractional reserve system. They expand the supply of fiduciary money, banknotes and their demand currencies, beyond the supply of commodity money available. And this has two effects. Number one, it allows the banks to give out more loans because they printed up more money artificially, backed by nothing, and thereby increases their profits. And number two, it enables all the holders of this fiduciary money to be unknowing partners with the federal banks in all those excessive loans and spreading the risks of these loans throughout society. The supply of fiduciary money is limited by the possibility of bankruptcy. Lots of people coming forward and demanding redemption. If such a thing happened, the banks would go bankrupt. So what do? The bankers then would go out and support legislation that is designed to insulate the fractional reserve banking system from threats. You see, they are threatened. They are extremely timid and very insecure. They're afraid of us. So they've got to insulate it through legislation. Their political cronies do the work. And they would use propaganda to con the public into believing that the banks were sound through so-called deposit insurance schemes. And they say things like, the government will pay. If we fail, the government will pay. Well, my friends, I'm here to tell you that since the federal government does not own the Federal Reserve Corporation, it is the people who will pay. And yet they don't know it. Second level. Bankers ask the government to authorize what used to be called suspension of specie payments. That means the bankers simply refuse to fulfill their promises to redeem the fiduciary notes with commodity money. And this refusal allows the bankers to stay in business even though they are bankrupt. Suspension of specie payments are a key indicator of the breakdown of the free market economy because they are a governmentally allowed repudiation of the promise to pay, a repudiation of contracts. Third level, to prevent bank runs then, the bankers lobby for government permission to repudiate their fiduciary monies totally. They want to convert fiduciary money into fiat money. There is no problem about bank runs then because there's nothing they have to redeem. Nothing. This action usually requires the government to force the circulation of fiat money. They can do so by several methods. For example, the government can, one, make that money tender in payment of taxes. People have to pay their taxes. And that will force the circulation. Two, declare that money legal tender for all debts. And three, outlaw contracts that are payable in any other form of money, especially commodity money. In the mid-1930s, that's precisely what the government did in that banking crisis. They turned Federal Reserve notes into fiat money, at least in respect to gold coins. These steps would substitute the taxpayer as ultimate guarantors of the fiat money instead of the banks and the bank's shareholders, all those banks that I listed off. And in return for this action, the banks would have to agree to do two things. One, they would agree to monetize the public debt, that is to buy government securities for duly created fiat money, enabling the government to use fiat money as an instrument of taxation. And two, they would agree to cooperate in some type of cartel or self-regulatory scheme to control the expansion of the supply of this fiat money within limits that maintain public confidence. In other words, the government and the banks agree to divide the amount that can be looted from the general public by manipulation of the money supply. They would agree to do so that the system would not collapse and public would not see that they are the ones paying the bills. Let's talk more about the fractional reserve banking system. Those agreements explain the fractional reserve banking scheme. It's a conspiracy between the Federal Reserve banks and political officials, public officials that you vote for, to take money from the American people. The Federal Reserve is simply a very elaborate and complicated device that's been set up